Hello, so today I'm going to demonstrate a simple biology science lesson that can be done at home, especially now that a lot of you are homeschooling your children right now. And although I used to do this lesson with my high school students and even some middle school students, really this could actually even be done with younger children. So these 5 pairs of cards, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5, represent the nucleus of an organism. And so the reason why I like to use, so these are chromosomes. These cards are chromosomes. And the reason why I like to use cards is that it helps students understand the concept of homologous pairs. So for example, right now we have 5 pairs with 2 different suits. And what this represents are each chromosome, for those of you not familiar with what chromosomes are. So chromosomes in essence are our body, all trillions of our cells have a nucleus. And the nucleus contains our DNA, which are made up of genes that code for who we are as an individual. And chromosomes are basically DNA molecules that are wound up very tightly that contain many different genes that code for a particular trait. So the reason why I like to use cards, and I use 2 different suits, in this case the diamond and the club, is that it helps students understand the concept that these pairs, which we call homologous pairs, are not identical. In fact, that's why we use different suits, and I prefer using different colors too. They complement each other because they carry similar genes that code for a particular trait that is each pair is called a homologous pair, and that's why they're called homologous pairs, because the chromosomes complement each other, and each chromosome in fact comes from their individual parents. So one set of chromosomes comes from one parent, the other set of chromosomes come from the other parent. And through this activity, we're able to demonstrate something called mitosis, which is needed when all of our cells divide. So when our cells divide, either for growth or just replacing old cells or repair of cells that got damaged, we have to go through a process called mitosis, which is sometimes known as nuclear division. And what this basically means is, in order for our cells to divide, the DNA, we need to make copies of all the DNA. They have to duplicate themselves. And in fact, through the cell cycle, there's actually something called the S phase. The S stands for synthesis. And the S phase is when all of the DNA in our cells replicate themselves or make copies of each other. So for example, we have an ace of clubs. There's also another ace of clubs. We have an ace of diamonds. There's another ace of diamonds. And during the process of mitosis, which we call the M phase, M for mitosis, what happens is that DNA the first phase of mitosis is something called prophase. So mitosis itself is broken into 4 phases: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. And during the process of prophase, what's happening is that this DNA that's replicated itself is going to get tightly wounded into in fact, we're not going to use the word chromosomes yet. We're going to use the word chromatid, T-I-D, chromatid. And what happens is that eventually this duplicate chromatid, or this DNA is being wound up tightly into a chromatid, it's eventually going to find its match. So its exact duplicate chromatid. And this is where it's getting ready for the next phase, which is referred to as metaphase. So right now, for example, we have the ace of clubs, and it's finding its other ace of clubs. Each one of these individual cards are therefore called the duplicate chromatids because they're copies of each other. And they're going to attach themselves with using tape. And the tape represents something called a centromere. So we're going to use the tape and we're going to find the match for each card. Each card will find its match. And they don't need to be lined up in order. If you ever look at the nucleus of a cell and its chromosomes, they're kind of scattered about, actually. But the important thing is that we do need to find its exact matching pair. And the reason why this is happening is so that when the nucleus divides into two identical nuclei, we want to make sure that the two nuclei, that the chromosomes are equally distributed, that we have one of each identical pair found in one of each nuclei or nucleus. So basically, both nuclei should have the same number of chromosomes, and all of the chromosomes should be unique. So here we are. We're going to match all of the different identical pairs. And this will get us ready for, so we're getting into what we call late prophase. And this will get us into into the next phase of mitosis, which is metaphase. And in the process of metaphase, what happens is that these duplicate chromatids will start lining up. And the reason why they're lining up is that they're preparing for, there's the other 5 of diamonds. They're preparing for the process of anaphase, which is when they're going to get separated. And again, the whole idea is that we want to make sure that each nucleus has one of these individual chromosomes, which are represented by the individual cards, each with their unique face value and suit. So now we are in metaphase, where the duplicate chromatids are lined up by what we call the equatorial plane. Now, if you want to go a step further, for those of you really who know science well, know biology well, you can actually use individual yarn or string, and you can tape them to the individual cards, and you can pull them apart with the yarn and the string, and that could represent the spindle fibers. That's definitely something you can try to do if you really want to kind of continue with the authenticity of the analogy, but that's really your own personal choice. So we are now in metaphase, and now that the cards are lined up by the equatorial plane, they're going to separate each other. They're going to say bye-bye to their twin or duplicate chromatid and separate in different piles. So let's start with, for example, the 5 of diamonds. And it's going to its pile. And we're going to move next to the 4 of diamonds. Again, going to its next pile into separate piles. And we're going to move into the 3 of clubs, the 4 of clubs, the 2 of diamonds, And again, really, they don't need to be neat rows because the reality is that we know the chromosomes in each individual nucleus is also often not in neat rows. Whoops. That's all over. The 2 of clubs, the 5 of clubs, and finally the Ace of diamonds. And so what you have now are 2 nuclei that are that 2 identical nuclei. You started out with 1 nucleus. Now you have 2 identical nuclei with all 10 chromosomes represented by the cards, and that they are then going to and each one of them have their 5 homologous pairs. So are they lined up? No, but in the reality is cells, the nucleus of all of our trillions of cells aren't either. So some things can think about. Well, okay, so this then gets ready for our next phase, which is telophase. And this can be represented with some string. Really, you can use whatever you want to do. You could use, well, you could use erasable crayon or chalk. But really, it's however. But it's the idea that, remember, all eukaryotic cells. So these are cells like us and pretty much all living things except for bacteria. We all have a nuclear membrane. Our genetic material is separated from the rest of our cells. And what makes a eukaryotic cell is that it has this nuclear membrane that separates it from the rest of the cell. And so this is telophase, which will eventually get us ready for cytokinesis, which is the actual division of the cytoplasm of the cell. And that's like the rest of the cell. So some key points to help your children understand or your students understand. Each one of these chromosomes contain genes that code for all of the traits in our bodies. So that means, for example, if you one of the cells in your lungs could have genes that code for the skin on your hand. Vice versa, your skin cells have genes that code for the cells in your lungs. It doesn't matter. We all have, with the trillions of cells in our body, all of our nuclei are identical, with the exception, of course, the sex cells, the gametes, the sperm and egg, which only contain half of our contents. But it helps students understand that we have, again, homologous pairs. In the case of humans, for example, we have 23 homologous pairs, and each pair contains 1 chromosome from one parent and another chromosome from the other parent. So again, they're not identical, they just complement each other, and they code for certain types of traits. And it's during the process of meiosis, which will be my next video, where we form the sex cells and the chromosomes actually split in half. So, but that's actually another lesson. But again, I hope that you've learned that this little activity was helpful and that this might be something that you can do with your students, as the concept of homologous pairs, the concepts of mitosis and chromosomes is not always easy for kids to understand. Thank you, and thanks for watching.